Hi, welcome to Signs of the Times. I'm your host, Dan Yisrael. This program is designed to serve as a forum for discussion of the social, economic, and political conditions of the world and local communities. The panelists that appear on Signs of the Times are individuals who, despite their diversity, have a common bond which links them, that is their study of history and their concern for humanity. This program is airing live right now. It airs every Monday night live here at 8 o'clock, and we welcome your phone calls at 770-559-2999. Also, I want to just let you know, Signs of the Times is also on the radio every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at 9 a.m. on WATB 1420. So if you miss us here on television, you can catch us on our live format as well on the radio at WATB 1420 a.m. Tonight we're going to talk about, our topic tonight rather, is Esau and Jacob. And we're going to explore the difference between the two brothers. If you know the story, Isaac had two sons, and those two sons was Esau and Jacob. So tonight we're going to deal with them historically, and we're going to bring them up to date and see just who's who. And we're going to investigate whether or not a Jew is truly only one that is outwardly, or is it truly the inward man of the heart. So with that, introduce our panel for tonight. We have Mr. Gideon Ben Israel, Tamar Israel, and David Geis. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, I said the thing about is it the Jew is only one outwardly, or is it inward man of the heart? But really, I think what I was alluding to there is this whole idea about an identity, because people can say that they're a Jew, and really they could be simply proselytes to the culture of the children of Israel. But I guess tonight we need to know who are the real Jews, and where that term derived from, Jews. And I think we have a good topic in that we're going to deal with the sons of Isaac, Esau and Jacob. So give us a little insight as to the history and the background of these sons.
Well, just in response to your opening comment, I mean, the New Testament makes that statement. It says one is not a Jew who's one outwardly, but who's one inwardly. And I think ultimately it's going to be the Most High who separates out the nations and tells who's who, because we do have a lot of years of history to go over. And in effect, everyone who grabs hold to the covenant of the Jewish Messiah, who is Yeshua, is going to need to become a Jew inwardly. Mm-hmm. And so that is the ultimate purpose for everyone who takes on the religion that Paul and Peter and James and the New Testament writers believed in, was to convert all the nations to Judaism, not Judaism under the old order, but under the new order of things. And so as individuals, we'll have to all become Jews in order to be delivered from the things that are about to come on the earth.
Right. Well, I mean, we know though that there is a difference between those sons, because they struggled in a mother's womb, and it was mentioned that there were two manner of people, two nations of people in her womb. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, see, that's the excitement that really is found within the pages of the Bible, because now you have unfolding a mystery that really was the first time it ever happened, actually. Well, actually the second time, because Noah's sons had to be numerous colors as well. But this time, in the same womb, Noah's sons were born at different times, but you had fraternal twins that would come out totally two separate nations. And that had not been done before. And there you have the so-called Negro, who is Jacob, and Esau, who is now called the so-called Israeli. That's the mystery of the whole earth. Who are the true Jews? Because even when you go back into the book of Revelations, it speaks of those who are saying they're Jews, but are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. So, we have to be very, very careful at that. Who today is professing to be the true Jews? Well, most Christians, most Muslims, most Hindus, all the nations would readily tell you that it's the people that's now in the land, that's occupied that land since 1948. But if you're a student of the Bible and you go back to the historical happening when one woman, a Hebrew gave birth to two different nations of people. Right. In the Bible, they're called Esau and Jacob. Jacob was our forefather, and Esau is the forefather of the people in the land today that looks more European by complexion than does Jacob, the so-called Negro. So you have the setting already set, and the reason why we have to keep our eye on it prophetically as well is because Yahweh said that there would be a group of people, your twin brother, who would take your place and who would say that they're the Jews. And when you go in and read the entire book of Obadiah, you have this story being played out. Now, our dealings with the so-called Jews, especially in this country, has probably been about as much as mine. I grew up in the Chicago area, and every Friday, we could go to a place in Chicago called Jew Town. And these people would buy up all kinds of, clothing, jewels. I mean, you had a array, a market of things to buy, leather for little or nothing. But again, they paid even more than nothing for it. But the Jews have always been able to financially secure a great deal of the world market today, and they are your world financiers. And so when you look at the structure of the world banking societies and you start to peel back all the curtains, then you see the so-called Jews, and then you make the connection with the synagogue of Satan.
Your brother Esau.
The statement in the New Testament about synagogue of Satan was given in the context of the 7 churches. And it was really dealing with the people who were still teaching animal sacrifice to the 7 churches. There have been a number of converts over history to Judaism, and it only stands to reason, given the nature of Judaism, that those who converted after a couple generations would lose touch with whether they were actually genetically descendants of Jacob and Judah, the tribe of Judah, which is where the name Jew comes from, or not. And on top of that, you have Jews being scattered all over the world, to some extent intermixing with local populations, to some extent not, because we know the nations are still intact in mass.
Exactly.
And so it's not, I don't think, completely possible to say exactly is on an individual level who comes from who, but we do know from the prophecies in the scripture that when the true Jews return to the land, that there will be a peaceful situation on the earth. That's pretty much the entire message of the Bible, really, Old and New Testaments. And we see since 1948, at least, we haven't seen a restoration of peace on earth. However, as I said, on the individual level, it's impossible to tell, I think, if someone is converted or goes back to the tribes who were scattered throughout Europe, Asia, and Africa at different times in history.
Gideon, let me ask you, what's the importance then of knowing that there is a difference between Esau and Jacob in this day and time?
Well, I think the importance lies in predesignation. The Most High has given each of us a predesignation even before we were born. Our destinies were laid out. Unfortunately for Esau, he said, Jacob have I loved, Esau have I hated, even before he was born. The story of Jacob and Esau is really reflective of the nature of godliness, God's sovereignty, and people being chosen for different positions in our world setting and as individuals as we deal with God. Because even though Esau was born first, and according to the laws of inheritance, he should have received a double portion, and all the laws regarding inheritance should have fallen on that individual because he lightly esteemed his birthright. The legalities involving his inheritance, and actually sold it for a morsel of bread to eat, is reflection of today God's holy people looking at his word in its purest sense and saying, I'm not worthy of that. That's what Jacob said to himself. I'm not worthy of this great honor. I don't think it means anything, so I'll sell it.
You mean
because
Esau?
I'm hard. I'm sorry. Yeah, Esau. Today, we look at the people on the earth and they see the scripture, and we see programs like this. We talk about who the Messiah is, what Christianity versus Judaism is about, but they reject it and say, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy to receive this truth. So as Esau realized that his destiny was not what he wanted it to be, and he chose to alter it through the want of his belly, even though Jacob didn't necessarily receive that because of his own desires. It was bestowed upon him because destiny had indicated it would be.
Exactly.
And even though we as a race of people, can anything good come from amongst the Israelites, them Negroes, the rabble of the Jews? But yet, our destiny is to rule the earth. So, for those who see, they will see and understand. But as Esau, for those who don't, they'll go on and live off the fat of the land now that Satan is ruling. But when true righteousness comes, there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
Well, you know, it's interesting. Esau and Jacob throughout their history have had a very interesting relationship. And as you mentioned about the book of Obadiah, Esau basically standing idly by and seeing Jacob being taken off, blocking the entrances to their land. And there's
Conspiring with the people who came to Jerusalem to make sure that we were here. It was the Most High who was doing it. But they made sure that they conspired with all the strangers who came over to spoil Yahweh's pleasant plant, so that this deception of who the true people would be made manifest. I'm sorry.
I mean, but no, it's an excellent point, though.
But you know, I was just thinking about that when you started to make that point, because we have always had an intertwined history, the so-called Negro and the Jew. Even in this country, when the civil rights movement came about, the Edomites, or the so-called Jews, were right there to help us in our cause, because they too, en masse, were being oppressed by the quote-unquote pure Aryan races. So by opening up the doors to the universities and the doors to higher learning and all sorts of things, they as minorities and having the right color stood number one above us to receive a lot of the grants and a lot of the things that happened. So they had real cause to promote the civil rights movement, because as you can see, the anti-defamation leagues, B'nai B'rith, these are groups that began to work for the better cause of the Edomites in this country. But we have to understand that all of this was for a reason, because it was already prophesied that there would be these two twins. And as Gideon was talking about that blessing and that birthright that was destined before they were born to our race, but Esau vowed, he said, the time of my father's death is at hand, and I'm going to slay my brother. And he's always vowed to take back that birthright. And when you go back even into the time of Christ, Herod the Great, look him up in your encyclopedia, he was of the Edomian lineage. So the Romans had already taken Esau, our brother, and put him over us in our own land as kings and queens. They were the ones that had John the Baptist's head cut off. They were the ones that scoured the Messiah and planted the thorns upon his head and mocked him with the gold robe. These are the people that were put in power over us. So it was very, very easy back in 70 AD when the Romans were just sick of our rebellions and our revolts, because we wanted our land back. We wanted to have control of our land. And that's when the Matthew 24th chapter was totally came about, which the Messiah prophesied the destruction of Jerusalem and our people taken into captivity. Now, David talked about the dispersion of our people all over the world, but the Jew, see, that's a different story. That's the holy seed of Yahweh. That is his pleasant plant, the tribes that he would do something special with. And what he did with that group is to the remaining tribes that were left after 70 AD, sold them into Africa. And then from there, they were the ones that were taken to a new and strange land. It says in Zechariah chapter 2, deliver yourself, O Judah, that dwells in the daughter of Babylon. So the royal house, the leaders of the 12 tribes of Israel, is the Jew. We are the Jews, those of us who have been here for almost 400 years. And we're the ones that don't know who we are. We believe with all our hearts that our so-called twin brother is really the Jew. We could care less about even researching these lineages to find out who we are. But again, we've always had that close history, and we do have a picture that depicts both Esau and Jacob in New York City during the Crown Heights incident. And this is our brother, but these are the people who have taken your identity, and the Europeans, the Muslims, all of the nations on the earth are in cahoots with this mass identity slaying of putting up the brother of Esau to be the chosen of Yahweh, but it's not so.
Well, it just falls in with all the other legends and myths of America and Greece and Rome that they come up with and have developed over the years. But you have to remember that Isaac blessed Esau. I mean, after he came back in, Jacob. And see, a lot of people like to look at the situation with Jacob and Esau because, see, there was some deception that took place in that whole scenario where Jacob received the blessing.
So was it deception or was it destiny?
It was destiny based on deception. And a lot of people who don't know the scope of the whole picture look at that to try to analyze how Yahweh uses people to his own end, no matter how you think or what you think about it. He does these things to his own end. And when Esau came back and Jacob, is he not rightly called Yachov, supplanter, and snatched that birthright? And he came and crying in tears, do you have a blessing for me, my father? And he told him, you'll be sustained off the fat of the land. And truly, he runs the earth. He got cash, he supplied. But he said, your brother is going to be over you. And the time is going to come, let Esau reign with the Gentiles in this kingdom. But in the kingdom of righteousness, that's when I want to reign with the kingdom of my father.
But you know, you talked about that destiny and purpose, because truly you can see the Yahweh's purpose supersedes no matter what law has been established.
Certainly.
So like you said earlier about the birthright issue, rightly so, he was supposed to inherit the birthright, but even before they were born, the elders shall serve the young.
That's where the Muslims fall when they deal with that the birthright with Ishmael. They don't want to consider that Yahweh is sovereign.
But check this out. Even with that, it says your only son. Abraham was told to deal with his only son, even though Ishmael was 13, or if not older.
So that's why it said, of all the nations of the earth, only you have I known. And people say, how can that be? When the Israelites were the last nation
we captive.
Created.
Right, we're captive.
Right.
In a strange land, and we don't even really have access, per se, to the land. You got brothers and sisters over there now, and the facade is that, well, we're going to take over the land and so forth. But the deal is, I mean, they're being rationed off things. They're placed by a nuclear reactor. I mean, those kind of things just don't line up for people that's going to.
Yeah, well, you know, like it's interesting because a number of groups make a claim to be the Israelites, the descendants of the ancient Hebrews. And as I said before, ultimately it'll be the Most High who separates out who's who. And
but none of them want the claim of the captivity.
Well, that's the central problem with the claim of if you go usually, like say on the internet, and you research Bible prophecy, and especially terms like Yahweh and Yeshua, which is the Hebrew name for Jesus, what you find is most of the people on the internet who are putting this forth are putting out a doctrine which is called Anglo-Israelitism, which is the doctrine which the Worldwide Church of God taught at one time, which was Herbert Armstrong's group. Of course, they taught that the Europeans here in America were the real Israelites, and they had it broken down where Ephraim and Manasseh were Great Britain and the United States. And of course, the problem with that is that according to the Bible, the Jews in the book of Hosea, it says they would be without any a rod or a king or a prince. It names several of the holy things, and it says they would be deprived of those during their captivity. So in that case, I think one case you could make is that it's definitely not the European Americans who are the true Israelites, because although they believe that Europeans are some sort of a chosen seed, they can't really substantiate it with the types of captivity and slavery which is described in the Bible. And of course now the European Jews have been persecuted to a great extent over history, the pogroms in Russia, and of course the most recent example was the Holocaust, which was a
12-year deal.
Right, which was not a continual captivity, but was definitely a systematic extermination. So like I said, the original 10 tribes of Jews were scattered throughout Europe 700 years before Christ. So those individuals, they're often called the 10 lost tribes.
Right.
And these are the ones that the Aryan nations, the Ku Klux Klan, those type people are claiming were migrated up into Scotland and England and Denmark and Great Britain. But again, I would say with the world system being primarily controlled, especially here in America, and in fact the British, had the greatest empire ever, arguably, in the world. The sun never set on the British Empire. And therefore, if the British, and Herbert Armstrong claimed that Queen Elizabeth sat on the throne of David.
Yeah.
So if the British were indeed the covenant people, I would think that the Most High would have returned, or he would have just stopped with the British Empire, and that would have been that. But we're still waiting. Like I said, we still got the state of Israel set up miraculously and seemingly according to prophecy, but the world is still waiting on that ultimate fulfillment, which is peace. And every individual, as I said before, regardless of what nation they come from, is going to have to be in a situation of righteousness and repentance in order to be spared the indignation that's coming, natural or not.
Well, there's a term, and that term is called manifest destiny. And we all represent a certain course of manifest destiny in our lives, and as our ultimate end plays itself out. So when we look at the world scenario, the Israelites, the Israelis, Jacob and Esau, and we combine that with the biblical story, we find certainly that our destinies are intertwined, but yet they're separate. And as we live out our lives and in the world picture, everyone, they're good and bad in all nations. There are beautiful people in every nation, in every religious aspect. But when it comes down to what this book says about who God has chosen, what the criteria is for practicing that religious or philosophical understanding, then it's clear that there's one nation of people that stand heads and tails above the rest. And those people are the Israelites, and they do also bear the lion's share of the responsibility as it relates to administering this word to the world.
Now, I'm sitting home, I'm watching this program, and we're talking Esau and Jacob, and my understanding of this conversation cannot solely be based upon skin complexion, okay? So, scripturally speaking, what should I be looking for as I investigate this topic? Should I look at the prophecy of the book, or just follow the nations and see if the different things that was to befall each of these brothers has manifested itself? I mean, what approach do I take if I'm just hearing this for the first time and just can't really swallow, okay, just because they're this color and this color, these are these different people? So do and I'm asking that for a reason, because obviously there's some people that's going to have that question in mind, but even those that do have such a question, my general response would be, well, how did you know that the Messiah was truly the Messiah? Because there have been many people that have come and said they were the Messiah, but the prophecy of the book has to fit that person. So am I in line with the rationale in terms of separating these brothers? And we'll answer that when I come back.
Hi, I'm David Geis, and this is the Signs of the Times Around the World report. Tonight's top story, Apocalypse Now. North Korea is having their apocalypse already. More than 3.5 million people have died in the famine in North Korea since 1994. Troops have been guarding fields since 1996 to prevent grain theft, but the peasants have been bribing the guards with food. Those who risk growing their own food in the mountains must continually stand guard over their plots. Most of the food that is harvested goes to the privileged class and to the government. The Chinese government is cracking down on the North Koreans who do flee to China. They are thrown into prison camps, and the Chinese Koreans who harbor them are heavily fined. The North Korean government is now threatening to put the technology that it previously claimed was for scientific research to military use. U.S. officials claim that North Korea is trying to develop ballistic missiles with ranges long enough to hit Hawaii and Alaska. Tuberculosis is still on the increase for both man and beast. The Asian economic woes not only affect stock markets, but real people. Widespread privation and malnutrition have resulted in the collapse of the Asian healthcare system. AIDS and drug-resistant TB are on the rise, even in Japan. Sudan also reports being in desperate need of TB drugs. Also, tuberculosis threatens the entire lion population of South Africa. World occupation continues. New World Army. America is preparing to lend her claws to NATO for airstrikes against the Serbs. The Serbian Republic elected a new president this week, and he was not America's choice. The U.S. spreads democracy and then has a problem with who the people elect. But it's out of America's hands now. The UN and NATO have a new type of special forces training to act as long-term occupation forces. World leaders are now finally realizing that peacekeeping really means long-term occupation. They're planning for it now. These are permanent global sheriffs for the global village. The euro, soon to rival the dollar. The coins have been minted. The big 11 are ready. They're all lined up by time zones. The 11 countries will assume the new currency time zone by time zone as the clock strikes midnight. But a question is arising. Who will speak for the new euro bloc? Who will lead the new 11-nation pact and speak for the beast? Who will speak for this confederation? Will it be Schroeder, the new German chancellor? He's socialist enough for the job. We'll see soon. Earthquakes this week. An earthquake hit the northeastern U.S. of 5.2 magnitude. It was felt in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and New York. Another 5.2 quake hit in northern Japan. Other weather news, there have never been this many hurricanes at one time as are currently brewing in the Atlantic on record. At least 4 are brewing right now. Carl grew into a hurricane on Friday, joining Hurricane George, Ivan, and Jeanne. One meteorologist at the National Hurricane Center was quoted as saying, "This is definitely something beyond the ordinary." Up to 3 feet of rain will fall in parts of the southern U.S. before George runs its course. And finally, the Catholic Church to apologize for past inappropriate behavior. A draft of a major document apologizing for the past errors of the Catholic Church is now finished. Such errors include the Inquisition and the prolonged historical mistreatment of Jews and heretics. The document, drafted by Vatican theologians, is part of the warm-up for the Church's huge millennium celebration. That's been the Around the World report for tonight. Now back to our regular program.
Welcome back to Signs of Times. Tonight we're talking about Esau and Jacob. We welcome your phone calls at 770-559-2999. That's 770-559-2999. I asked a question earlier about the, just sort of trying to, if I'm seeing this and hearing this for the first time, how do I really make a distinction between the brothers if I didn't just use the skin complexion as the ultimate determinant?
Well, the determination has to be within the pages of the scriptures. What is the prophetic view of each of these sons?
Mm-hmm.
And you do have to go in and follow each of your references for these two sons to see what the blessings and what the curses would be.
Okay.
You know, it's funny because David spoke of one that's very easy to look at in today's view and understand. He talked about how the Israelis have been persecuted throughout time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when you go into Ezekiel chapter 35, verse 5 states, "Because you have had a perpetual hatred and have shed the blood of the children of Israel by the force of the sword in the time of their calamity, in the time that their iniquity had an end, therefore as I live, saith Yahweh Elohim, I will prepare you unto blood, and blood shall pursue you. Since you did not hate blood, even blood shall pursue you." And we know that there really is not a day that passed that these people are not under some sort of terroristic attack. Even before they came out of Europe, they were always persecuted. Even in this country, they were persecuted. And it's because of these prophetic things about Esau. Why? Because he hated Jacob, his brother. And he has taken over his land. He has taken his identity and his heritage, and he's claiming it for himself. And only time will tell when Yahweh comes and takes these people who are nothing, who don't even know who they are, and give them their land back, the holy city of Jerusalem. And that is what is going to cause all the nations, especially the European nations, to surround us, and that is the Battle of Armageddon. It's because we will have taken back our land from the Israelis that's in that city today, because that's the land that the Messiah will rule from in the next millennium. And we're going to be there as co-rulers of that kingdom.
Of course, you know, the Bible makes it clear that when this when the final conquest of Jerusalem happens, it's going to be the returned Messiah who leads the charge. So of course, there's no reason for any of us to try to do anything other than prepare ourselves spiritually for the events that are coming. It's not a case of people rallying up without a leader and trying to do anything, because when the time is at hand for that to happen, it's going to be made manifest what everyone needs to do.
Well, I think we have a caller. Caller, go ahead. State your name, please.
Yes, my name is Michael.
Yes, sir.
I was going to state that it's very easy to identify the Edomites or the Idumeans in the land today, because basically they're preparing to build a temple and do animal sacrifice. They're claiming that some Cohens are direct descendants of Levites, and basically the Lord did away with animal sacrifice. Hebrews 10:4-18 makes that very clear. And the prophecy, Obadiah, as the sister mentioned, various prophecies, because when the Lord returned, we know that when the Jews are back in the land, we'll be able to look over and see the Lord, and we'll see the apostles, excuse me, we'll see them sitting on the thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. So we know the true Jews are not back in the land, that is Idumea, who basically came in and took the land after Titus in 70 A.D.
What do you, my brother?
Yeah, thank you for your insight, brother.
Well, you know, you mentioned following the histories, and in a sense that's possible, as Tamar mentioned, through prophecy. In another sense, it's not, because by the time that Christ was born, the Jews included the Idumeans, or the Idumeans, as he pronounced it, or the Edomites. They were part of the group known as the Jews, because about 160 or so years earlier, they had been converted by a priest named John Hyrcanus. There were two. The first John Hyrcanus was with Simon and Yehudis Maccabee, who were the priests who kicked the Jews out of the land. Kicked the Greeks out of the land and returned it to the Jews. This is the Feast of the Dedication, is what that commemorates, was the recapturing of the temple.
Right.
Well, a couple of generations later, a corrupt grandson of one of the priests of that era, got together with Antipater, who was Herod's father, and they converted the Edomites to Judaism. This is why, and so at the time Christ was born, the Edomites were in leagues with the Romans. The Romans had set them up as the rulers, which is why Herod, who was of a Edomian background, was actually king of the Jews. He was, and there was a statement in the New Testament when Christ said, he said, beware of the leaven of Herod. So the Herodians then were a sect of Jews, just like the Pharisees, Sadducees, the Essenes, and the apostles themselves, the Nazarenes. They were another group in that. In fact, they were the ruling group in Judaism. So as Jerusalem was destroyed and they fled into Rome and then into Europe, you have people so whoever the Idumeans are today, they have been practicing Judaism since at least the first century, which is 2,000 years.
You know, it's interesting you say that. Excuse me, just man. It's interesting you say that the Messiah said, "Beware of the leaven of the Herodians."
They've been practicing a false religion for 2,000 years.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Satan has a Christian church and he has a synagogue of Satan.
Right, exactly.
Satan has not left any boundaries unchanged because of the way the so-called Old and New Testament was set up. You have to understand that there must always be a so-called chosen people, and Satan has one to deceive you. And there must be a church of the Messiah, and he has one to deceive you. So all mankind actually do think that these Herodians were practicing the true religion. Well, if they are, why are they calling the 7th month the first year of the month, first month of the year?
Right.
They practice a similitude of our culture, just like the Christians practice a similitude of our culture. But no one practices the culture of the Jews except those who have returned to the faith and to the culture, who have been open to who they are so that they can see and hear and understand these words and have returned to the fullest to try to walk in the way that Yahweh gave to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So the nations have deceived the world. And the Edomites are a big cause of that deception. When you go back even into the history of the Illuminati, who do you see first? You see an Edomite, Adam Wasop. When you look back into the connection with the Vatican, who do you see? The Jews, these so-called Jews. They've always been in power with whoever was in power. So because they became proselytes to our way, that doesn't mean that they were keeping the way to its fullest. They were not, and that's why the Messiah warned us of them. But there were Jews dealing with those sects. But again, they could not be a true Jew. That means being a part of the tribe of Yehuda or the house of Yehuda. There are many proselytes in all different types of nations to our way. And that's exactly what happened when the Greeks, during the Greek era. But in terms of being a Jew, no, they weren't. They are deceiving the world. That's what they're doing.
Let me jump in here briefly and say, it boils down to, and it's something I always remember that the elder says, and as based on the scripture, you can't worship God unless he wants you to. So it doesn't matter how much you run, or how fast you run, or how hard you run, or how much you play, how much you think. It's whether God has chosen you to receive these things. 2 verses here in Obadiah, and I think this will clear up why, no matter what an individual does who's been destined for destruction, they're still going to receive destruction. It says in verse 10 in Obadiah, "For your violence against your brother Jacob, shame shall cover you, and you shall be cut off forever. In the day that you stoodeth on the other side, in the day that the strangers carried away captive his forces, and foreigners entered into his gates, and cast lots upon Jerusalem, and you was even as one of them." See, that's the issue. And it wasn't that all Edomians or all Israelis don't recognize now who the truth lies with and how they should practice, but the curse falls on whom Yahweh would have it fall on, just as the blessings fall on whom Yahweh would have it fall on.
Let's go back to the phones. Caller, go ahead. State your name, please. Go ahead, caller, state your name, please. We got another call?
I'd like to
Okay.
read
Sure, go
a
ahead.
piece of scripture in Ezekiel chapter 36, verse 5.
Mm-hmm.
It says, "Therefore, thus saith Yahweh Elohim, surely in the fire of my jealousy have I spoken against the residue of the heathen and against all Idumea, which have appointed my land into their possession with the joy of all their heart, with despiteful minds to cast it out for a prey." Here you have, in the past 10 years, so-called peace negotiations. They've allowed the Muslims to have their part of the land. You know, the Vatican, the Christians have their part in the land, and they're continually to try to make Jerusalem a city to all nations, to all pagan shrines, and that's the holy city of Yahweh, and he's not going to stand for it much longer. So, yes, they are the synagogue of Satan, and they have turned that land into a complete desolation because of their abominable practices.
Right.
Exactly. They're not the Jews. They never have been. They are the synagogue of Satan.
That's pretty, you know, the reason I mentioned the thing about the Messiah is saying, just beware of the leaven of the Herodians. I mean, here you got a man of one nation of people. I mean, even though they was of the same family, but clearly, back when she inquired about the struggle in her womb, it said 2 manner of people. And here you have the Messiah. Here you have the Messiah of the seed of Jacob,
Right.
you know, of that same lineage. But then you got Esau,
Right.
the Edomian. I mean, a distinction, just as was the picture that you showed here earlier.
Well, the distinction has to do with how one accepts the story of the Bible and how the players in that story, Yahweh has placed in that, what positions he's placed them in the story. Because the world has painted one story, but the book has... So which one are you going to go with?
We're the real Jews stand.
Right.
Let's go back to the phones. Caller, state your name, please.
Yeah, my name's Ali.
Ali?
Yes, sir. I have a question for the gentleman on the left, far left. I'm just wondering how much knowledge you have, because you should really look fucking goofy.
I missed what he said. I don't think it was worth. He hung up the telephone, so
It's either you or me, depending on which left he's talking about.
Anyway, you know, it's interesting. We've been doing this program for several years, and I can count on one hand the number of hecklers, because people who listen to the program, at least their conscience has been raised high enough to investigate the things that we're saying. So every now and then we're going to have a bad apple, if you will.
Well, you know, we're dealing with a subject and subject matter that's emotionally charged.
Right, truly.
And certainly we have to recognize the impact for those who realize that the biblical story is true, but the references and the effect of what we're saying is based on biblical scripture
say that
and
they're
biblical
Jews.
dogma.
Who say that they're Jews and are not.
Not to say that we're all righteous, because we're not. We're all have sinned and come short of the Most High.
True.
And so, but yet we have the doctrine to deal with, and we relate a story.
And
Yeah,
it's
that's
open
a-
for discussion, too.
I think he indicated a call.
Oh, we have another call. If you had a point, go ahead.
Well, go ahead. This
Okay.
take a minute.
Caller, go ahead. State your name, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Your name?
My name is Tina Wells,
Yes, ma'am.
and I was calling because I watch your show and I like the things that you discuss. So I had called one day and the show was over, but I had sent a novel to you to read. It was called The American Shame, and it's about the Bible and stuff, problems in the Bible. And I never heard anything from you, and I was wondering if you had received it.
I have not received it. If you will, please leave your number and name,
Okay.
and we can give you a call.
Okay.
I'd be glad to take a look at it.
Okay.
Did you have a question or comment?
Well, that's what I wanted to just
Okay.
say, that I had listened to you discuss things, and it led me to think that I could send this book to you, and if you read it, and if you like it, then maybe you can discuss that topic.
Absolutely. Thank you for your comment. Thank you for sending the book. And by the way, we're located at 3901A Covington Highway. That's Decatur at 30032. And we can be reached also at 44286-5869. Also, just want to mention, we're also on the radio. WATB 1420 AM and that's every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday morning at 9 a.m. So by all means, you don't get a chance to watch the television program, or you know people that do not have cable, they can tune in to the radio at every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at 9 a.m. We have another caller. Caller, go ahead, state your name, please.
My name is Lawrence.
Lawrence?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I still haven't received my calendar. That's just a comment. I haven't received my calendar. And my question is that out of all the different nations, people said it doesn't make a difference what color Yeshua was, but if you don't have, like, say, some type of perception of what he looked like when he was here, how would you know who to look for when when he returns?
Good question, and I think you addressed that earlier, talking about the prophecy of the book. And also, leave your name and number, and we'll send you a calendar.
Let me just say this regarding that particular point. There are two levels to dealing with the scriptures, and the one level is the physical book and the type of blocking and tackling, if you will, that it takes, the research that it does. The other level is the spiritual knowledge that you receive that makes you connect with your Creator. So it's not so much the man's physical presence that is the foremost aspect of his having come to earth. Certainly his natural seed and bloodline have a very important part to do with the natural seed and family from which he came. But the most important aspect of who he is and who he was the obedience to his father and the words that he spoke that were directly related to the prophecies and the laws and the covenants that had been given to Yahweh, or had been given to Israel by Yahweh. So that's really the true and most important part of the presence of the Messiah, our Adonai Yeshua, that we should remember.
You know, a lot of people don't realize that what we call the Middle East today, we mentioned the tension between the Israelis and the Palestinians that's currently going on. The Palestinians claim that they're the regional people of that region as well. I mean, and they were there before the Israelis showed up, so in that sense, it's somewhat tenable. There was a statement made a couple years ago by Yasser Arafat where he said, you know, I don't understand the big deal about Jesus, who was a Palestinian prophet. You know, and he went on to refer to him as a Palestinian prophet, implying, of course, that he was from among the Palestinian people. So there's a number of groups, as I mentioned. There's Anglo-Israelites, there's Black Israelites, but it's important to note that not all Black people would be Black Israelites. There are Black Jews who have proven themselves to be Black Jews who have immigrated to Israel, who the rabbinical councils who check people out have allowed to enter into the land of Israel because they met the criteria for being Jews. But African people are, of course, Black people, and they're not all Jews, just like European people and many European Jews resemble European people, but they're not all of the same nation. So we've got to get out of a lot of our thinking that's in black and white, because we're all from America where everything is black or white. But the existence of Black Jews does not mean that all Black people are Jews.
Let's go back to the phones. Caller, state your name, please.
Joanne.
What was your name? I'm sorry.
Joanne.
Yes, ma'am.
Joanne. I'm just curious to know, I'm not sure if I missed this or whether or not you covered this, but who were the people that rejected Jesus? Were they of Esau or Jacob? And I'll hang up and listen to your response.
Good question.
Both groups.
Well, the Jews are the ones who rejected him en masse, and that's us. That's why we're sitting here today as captive slaves, because truly, en masse, our people did reject him. Now, there's always been a remnant, and that's what was left after the Messiah, is a remnant of our people who's come down through the ages, who did believe in the Son of Yahweh, who they knew the spirit of the Son of Yahweh, who dwelt in the man that they saw, that they knew was a carpenter, that walked among them. But, yeah, it was us who rejected him. And that's the reason why we're in the condition that we're in today, because he was sent unto his own, but his own received him not. But as many of them that did receive him, to them Yahweh will give the power to become the sons and daughters of Yahweh.
Let's go back to the phones. Caller, go ahead. State your name, please.
Yes, I'm Crystal. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Not talking too loud, am I? and I'm in Stone Mountain. What I wanted to ask about, I had two questions, but I don't think I have time for both. But one of them is when we were trying to identify the 12 tribes, I've been doing some studying, and I was wondering, have you all studied or talked about the fact that it could be possible that the indigenous inhabitants of like North, South, and Central America, the American Indians and the Hispanics, could possibly be those 10 lost tribes? And the reason why I study on this so much is because there are places in the Bible that kind of make me feel that this could be possible. For instance, in Genesis 49, it says, Gad, a troop shall overcome him, but he shall overcome at the last. And that reminds me of like the U.S. Cavalry.
Let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Do you study with the group that's downtown, this group called the House of David, because they perpetuate that same doctrine?
No.
And I'm just asking that because I've had people come to the Bible class who put out that doctrine, and the only thing that they use to substantiate that is some book, I think, I'm not even sure if it's Reader Digest, but there's a statement made, and there's talking about Gad and them being the cavalry, but I don't see where that really lines up. But your second question, and we'll deal with the question, but your second question quickly. Oh, she's gone? Okay.
Well, let me make a comment about that. The name Gad means troop.
Right.
And as far as distinguishing the 12 tribes, I would dare say that would be, as I said at the beginning of the program, that's God's job to tell who's who in the world in general, and especially with the 12 tribes, because 10 of them were settled in, pretty much lost their identity, were scattered, and that was in 721 BC.
Right.
The people who were in the land at the time of Christ were the tribes of Benjamin, the tribe of Judah, and the tribe of Levi, who after the destruction of Jerusalem were savagely rounded up and sold into Africa.
Right.
So there would be no way to distinguish the tribes today. I've seen people lay out everything from Haiti, the Dominican Republic, and they even have the Haiti and the Dominican Republic. They're on the same island. They even have them doing two different tribes. But I don't think that those tribal identities have been retained, except to the extent that God Himself can separate them out.
But you know what? You can do this. You can say that the so-called black people over in Europe, Asia, and Africa who don't know who they are, like us, are of the 10 lost tribes. And you can also make a claim that the Judites are basically in Africa and over in what they call the New World. So all of the Spaniard countries that the Spanish came over and settled in Latin America and Central America, they brought slaves there too.
True.
So these were your Judites who were sold from Africa into the New World. So we know that the house of Judah primarily exists over here. And then the house of Israel, which are the 10 tribes, are primarily in Europe and Asia.
You know, it's
It's the
interesting.
Spanish word Negro, which means black.
You know, it's interesting, when the British was coming, they said a troop coming, so was that Gad. Let's go back to the phone. Caller, go ahead, state your name, please.
Hello.
Your name?
Hello. I'm the same person. I got cut off before.
Okay. Now, one thing, we try to keep the lines open for other people and really don't try to make light of what you're saying, but we'd like to see some of the information that you have. If you can give us a call at 44286-5869. That's 44286-5869. Do we have another call?
Yeah, you know,
she did have.
Oh, she's there? Oh, she's gone. Okay.
Each of us have, you know, our own, you know, a limited amount of knowledge, and there's always more that can be gathered. And if anyone, as a viewer, has any information that would either support or conflict with what I personally have said, or any of us, we would like to hear about it, because it's really all about us as people furthering our own education in a public way to get information out there to the public.
Truth will set you free.
Amen. Well, the whole story of Jacob and Esau, and also when it involves how emotional this topic is, it really lies at the very heart of how you relate to Scripture, how you relate to your God, how you relate to what you feel your place is in this great story. Because what Jacob and Esau essentially does is set up a criteria for involvement in this way of life.
Got about 30 seconds.
So, however the Spirit moves you to do your research so that Yahweh can reveal himself through that scripture, let yourself be moved and do your research.
I hope this program tonight has been edifying to those of you who are watching. And we've talking about Esau and Jacob. If you'd like to get more information, you can write us or call us at 3901A Covington Highway. That's Decatur, Georgia, 30032. Or you can call us at 404-286-5869. That's 404-286-5869. Also, we have a website, www.thencci.com. See you next week. What in the world was that?